My brother stole my incredible business idea, but I outmaneuvered him by teaming up with his wife, and then I've always been the idea guy in my family. You know, the one who dreams big, talks about startups, and spends way too much time tinkering with business plans instead of actually relaxing on weekends. My younger brother Nathan, on the other hand, is more of a smooth talker. He's always been great at charming people, whether it's at work, with friends, or even at family dinners. We've never been super close, but I thought we respected each other enough to keep things civil. That assumption turned out to be completely wrong. For the past 2 years, I've been working on this app idea. I don't want to get too technical, but basically, it's a platform that connects small business owners with independent contractors in a way that no other service out there currently does. It's one of those ideas you get excited about because it feels like a real solution to a real problem. I'd spent months researching the market, saving money for a prototype, and even learning basic coding so I could understand the process better. My best friend Jared was helping me out with the technical side, and we were finally getting close to a point where we could pitch it to investors. But here's the thing about being an optimist. Sometimes you trust people more than you should. That's exactly what happened with Nathan. A couple of months ago, I told him about the app. I didn't go into crazy detail, but I gave him the gist of it. I thought he might have some useful advice since he's in sales and works with clients all the time. He acted interested, asked a lot of questions, and even said he was proud of me for working so hard on something. I felt good about sharing it with him, like maybe this was the first time we could connect as adults and not just as brothers who bickered over stupid stuff growing up. I told him I was planning to meet with a potential investor, Vanessa, in a few weeks, and he even gave me a pep talk about staying confident and pitching like a pro. Fast forward to last weekend. Our mom, Diane, had invited the whole family over for dinner, which she does every month or so. It's usually a low-key thing. Just us, some home-cooked food, and a lot of reminiscing about the old days. This time felt different, though. Nathan walked in with this cocky swagger I hadn't seen before, and Lauren, his wife, looked like she wanted to be anywhere else but there. I didn't think too much of it at first. Nathan's always been the type to exaggerate his success, so I figured he probably landed a decent client at work and was feeling himself. We were halfway through dinner when Nathan dropped the bomb. He started talking about this incredible new business venture he was working on. At first, I didn't make the connection. I just nodded along, trying to be polite. But the more he talked, the more my stomach sank. He was describing my app, not just the concept, but the specific details, the target audience, the unique features, even the name I'd been testing out with Jared. I felt like I was in a dream, like I'd misheard him or something. But then he said the words that made it all click. I'm meeting with Vanessa next week to finalize the pitch. I just froze. My brain couldn't keep up with what was happening. Nathan had stolen my idea, flat out stolen it, and was now bragging about it in front of our entire family. To make it worse, everyone at the table was congratulating him like he just won the lottery. Even Mom looked impressed, though she was trying to play it cool. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The app wasn't just some casual side project for me. It was 2 years of my life. Late nights, early mornings, endless hours of work, and he just took it. I wanted to call him out right then and there, but I held back. I could feel the heat rising in my face, and my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. But I didn't want to make a scene in front of Mom. She's been through enough stress with family drama over the years, and I wasn't about to add to it. So instead, I sat there, silently fuming, while Nathan kept going on and on about his brilliant idea. After dinner, I pulled him aside and asked him what the hell he was doing. At first, he tried to play dumb, acting like he didn't know what I was talking about. But when I pressed him, he just smirked and said, "Come on, Derek. You weren't doing anything with it." I figured I'd take it and actually make it happen, like it was no big deal. Like I should be grateful he was stealing my work, because he'd somehow do it better. I don't know what came over me, but I shoved him. Hard. It wasn't like me. I'm not a violent person, but I just couldn't stand the smug look on his face. He stumbled back and started laughing, which only made me angrier. "You need to calm down," he said. "This is business. You should have moved faster if you didn't want someone else to take the lead." I walked away before I did something I'd really regret. But the second I got in my car, I started spiraling. How the hell was I supposed to compete with him? Nathan's always had this natural charisma that people are drawn to. He's the guy who can walk into a room and have everyone eating out of the palm of his hand within 5 minutes. I, on the other hand, am not that guy. I'm the one who works hard behind the scenes, who hopes the work speaks for itself. But in a situation like this, where he'd already stolen my idea and pitched it to my investor, I didn't see how I could win. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed up thinking about every decision I'd made over the past 2 years and where I'd gone wrong. I kept coming back to the same question. Why the hell did I tell Nathan? Of all people, why him? I should have known better. He's always been competitive, always looking for shortcuts to get ahead. I guess part of me just wanted to believe that maybe he'd changed, that maybe he could actually be proud of me instead of trying to one-up me. I was so wrong. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I didn't know how yet, but I was going to fight back. Nathan might have the charm, but I had something he didn't, the ability to outthink him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After that disaster of a dinner, I couldn't stop obsessing over what Nathan had done. Every time I replayed the conversation in my head, I'd get angrier. I felt trapped. If he was already pitching to Vanessa, there was no way I could get ahead of him. I was sure she'd be impressed by his confidence, and without knowing the full story, she'd have no reason to think the idea wasn't his. The thought of him walking away with all the credit for my work made me sick. I spent the next few days avoiding his calls and messages. I guess he thought we'd just move past it, like it was a minor misunderstanding or something. But there was no way I was going to let this go. The problem was, I didn't know what to do. I couldn't exactly go to Vanessa and say, "Hey, by the way, my brother is a liar and a thief." That would make me look bitter and petty, and it wouldn't change anything unless I had solid proof. I needed a plan, and I needed to act fast. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from Lauren. Nathan's wife and I had never been particularly close. She's nice enough, but she's the kind of person who always seems to stay in her lane and avoid drama. The text was simple. "Hey, can we meet up? I need to talk to you about something." I almost ignored it. I was in no mood to have a heart-to-heart with anyone in Nathan's orbit, but something about the message felt off. She didn't mention Nathan or try to smooth things over, which is what I would have expected if she was trying to play peacemaker. Instead, she sounded serious, almost urgent. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near her place. When I walked in, she was already there, staring into her cup like she was trying to solve a math problem. She looked up when she saw me and gave me this weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for coming," she said, motioning for me to sit down. "What's this about?" I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. I was still furious, and the last thing I wanted was for her to defend Nathan. Lauren hesitated for a moment, then leaned in like she didn't want anyone else to hear. "I know what Nathan did," she said quietly. "That caught me off guard." "What do you mean?" I know he stole your idea," she said, her voice firm now. "And I think it's total bullshit." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But she wasn't joking. She looked genuinely upset, and for a second, I saw something in her expression I hadn't expected. Guilt. "Wait," I said, narrowing my eyes. "You knew about this?" "I didn't know at first," she said quickly. "He told me about the app a couple of weeks ago, and at first, I thought it was his idea. But then he let it slip that he got it from you. He said you weren't doing anything with it, and that he could make it happen faster. And you didn't think to tell me?" I snapped, my anger flaring up again. "I wanted to," she said, looking down at her hands. "But I didn't know how. I'm not proud of this, Derek, but Nathan doesn't exactly take criticism well. Every time I brought it up, he'd just brush me off or change the subject. I've been trying to figure out what to do ever since." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to walk out and leave her to deal with the mess her husband had created. But the other part of me, the part that was desperate for any kind of leverage, knew I couldn't afford to do that. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked finally. She took a deep breath, like she'd been holding it in for days. "Because I can't stand watching him act like this. He's been so arrogant ever since he started working on the pitch. He's always been selfish, but this feels different. It's like he doesn't even care who he hurts as long as he gets what he wants. And honestly, she looked me in the eye. I think you deserve better. You've worked so hard on this, and he just swooped in and took it. It's not right. I didn't know what to say. I'd been so caught up in my anger that I hadn't even considered the possibility of having an ally in this, especially not someone as close to Nathan as Lauren. So what are you saying? I asked cautiously. I'm saying I want to help you, she said. I don't know how yet, but if there's anything I can do to level the playing field, I'm in. Nathan might be my husband, but that doesn't mean I agree with what he's doing. I studied her for a moment, trying to figure out if she was serious. She seemed sincere, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was some kind of trap. Why should I trust you? I asked bluntly. She didn't flinch. You don't have to, she said, but I don't want to sit back and watch him get away with this. If you're willing to fight for what's yours, I want to help. I still wasn't sure what to think, but the truth was, I didn't have many options. If Lauren could give me insight into Nathan's plans, or help me find a way to expose him, it might be my only shot. And if she was lying or trying to set me up, well, I'd deal with that when the time came. All right, I said finally. If you're serious about this, we'll see what we can do. She nodded, relief flashing across her face. I am, she said, and I have an idea of where we can start. Over the next hour, Lauren laid everything out for me. She'd been keeping an eye on Nathan's progress and knew exactly how far along he was with the pitch. He had a rough prototype, one he'd outsourced to a freelance developer, but it was riddled with bugs and missing key features. Vanessa was scheduled to see the demo in less than a week, and according to Lauren, Nathan was banking on his charisma to make up for the app's shortcomings. That's his weak spot, Lauren said. He's overconfident. He thinks he can sell anything, even if it's not ready. So what do we do? I asked. We outwork him, she said simply. You still have the original concept, right? The full version, with all the features you wanted to include. Yeah, I said. It's not finished, but Jared and I were making good progress before all this happened. Then finish it, she said. Make it better than anything Nathan could dream of. If you can prove that your version is the real deal, Vanessa will see right through him. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best one I had. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. If Nathan thought he could win by cutting corners, he was in for a rude awakening. This wasn't just about the app anymore. It was about proving to myself, and to him, that I wasn't someone he could walk all over. By the time I left the coffee shop, I was more determined than ever. Nathan might have stolen my idea, but he wasn't going to steal my future. Not if I had anything to say about it. The next few days were a blur of work, stress, and barely any sleep. As soon as I left that coffee shop, I called Jared and told him everything. At first, he couldn't believe it. Your brother actually stole your idea? What the hell, man? He said, his voice filled with disbelief and anger. Yeah, I said, pacing around my apartment like a caged animal. But we're not rolling over. We're going to finish this app, and it's going to blow Nathan's crappy version out of the water. Jared was all in. He's the kind of guy who thrives under pressure, and once I explained the situation, he was just as motivated as I was. All right, he said, let's do this. But if I ever run into your brother, I'm punching him in the face, just so you know. We dove in headfirst, working long hours to clean up the code and add the final features that would make the app stand out. The biggest hurdle was time. Nathan's pitch to Vanessa was less than a week away, and we knew he'd try to lock her down before anyone else could get to her. If we wanted to compete, we had to move fast. Lauren kept feeding me updates on Nathan's progress. Every evening, she'd send me a message or call to let me know what he was working on and what his timeline looked like. I have to admit, I was still skeptical about her motives at first. She was married to the guy, after all. But the more we talked, the more I realized she was genuinely on my side. She hated what Nathan was doing just as much as I did, maybe even more. One night, she called me while I was at Jared's place, and I put her on speaker. Nathan's been rehearsing his pitch all day, she said. He's confident, but the app is still a mess. He keeps complaining about bugs and glitches, but he doesn't have time to fix them before the meeting. Jared smirked. Typical. He's all flash, no substance. What about Vanessa? I asked. Has he told her anything about the bugs? Not a word, Lauren said. He's planning to sell her on the concept and hope she doesn't notice the flaws. But if she starts asking technical questions, he's screwed. I exchanged a look with Jared. This was our opening. If we could finish the app and present it as polished and complete, Vanessa would see the difference immediately. There was no way she'd invest in Nathan's half-baked version when she could have the real deal. By the time the weekend rolled around, Jared and I were running on pure adrenaline. The app was almost finished, but there were still a few features we needed to test and refine. I hadn't left the apartment in 3 days, and Jared's couch had become my bed. Lauren stopped by once to drop off coffee and snacks, and for a moment, I almost forgot whose wife she was. She looked exhausted, like she'd been dealing with as much stress as we had. "How's it coming?" she asked, setting the coffee cups on the counter. "Close," I said. "We've got most of the bugs worked out, but we're still fine-tuning the user interface." She nodded, glancing at Jared, who was hunched over his laptop. "You guys are doing great," she said softly. "I know this hasn't been easy." I wanted to say something reassuring, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I just nodded and went back to work. By Sunday night, we were ready. The app wasn't perfect, but it was miles ahead of whatever Nathan was putting together. Jared and I tested it one last time, checking for any glitches or issues that might trip us up. When everything worked smoothly, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Okay," I said. "Now we just need to get it in front of Vanessa before Nathan does." Lauren had already taken care of that. She'd managed to get in touch with Vanessa's assistant and set up a meeting for Monday afternoon. I didn't ask how she pulled it off, and honestly, I didn't care. All that mattered was that we had a shot. Monday morning felt like a showdown. I woke up early, went over my pitch a dozen times, and double-checked that the app was running perfectly. Jared was coming with me to handle any technical questions, and Lauren had promised to keep Nathan distracted as long as possible. As I walked into Vanessa's office building, my heart was pounding. This was it, the moment I'd been working toward for 2 years. I couldn't let Nathan take it away from me. Vanessa was sitting behind a sleek glass desk when we walked in. She was in her late 30s, with sharp features and an air of authority that made me instantly nervous. But she smiled warmly when we introduced ourselves, and I felt a tiny bit of the tension in my chest ease. "All right, Derek," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. "Let's see what you've got." I launched into my pitch, explaining the concept, the market research, and the unique features that made the app stand out. Jared chimed in occasionally to answer technical questions, but for the most part, I handled it. Vanessa listened intently, nodding along and asking thoughtful questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, looking impressed. "This is solid," she said. "Really solid. I've seen a lot of pitches, but this stands out. I especially like how user-friendly it is." Relief washed over me, but I didn't let myself celebrate just yet. "I'm glad you like it," I said. "We've put a lot of work into making it the best it can be." Vanessa glanced at her assistant, who handed her a folder. "I'll need some time to review everything," she said, "but I'm very interested. Let's touch base later this week." As we walked out of the office, I felt like I was floating. Jared clapped me on the back, grinning from ear to ear. "You killed it, man," he said. "There's no way Nathan can top that." But my victory was short-lived. As soon as I got to my car, my phone started buzzing. It was Lauren. "Derek," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Nathan found out about your meeting. He's furious. He's saying you sabotaged him, and he's planning to call Vanessa to set the record straight." I gritted my teeth. Of course he was. Nathan had never been able to handle losing, and now that he knew I'd beaten him to the punch, he was going to do everything he could to undermine me. "Let him try," I said, my jaw tight. The work speaks for itself. But even as I said the words, I couldn't shake the feeling that this fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When Lauren called me later that night, I could tell she was more nervous than before. Her voice trembled slightly as she explained what had gone down. "Nathan's been pacing around the house like a madman," she said. "He found out about your meeting with Vanessa because he called her assistant to confirm his own pitch time, and apparently Vanessa mentioned you. He's furious. He keeps saying you're trying to steal his thunder." I let out a bitter laugh. "Steal his thunder? Are you kidding me? He's the one who stole my idea in the first place." "I know," Lauren said quickly. But Nathan doesn't see it that way. He's convinced he's the victim now. He's talking about calling Vanessa first thing in the morning to tell her you're sabotaging him. That's rich, I said. He can't sabotage me without admitting what he's done. If he wants to take this public, I say let him. It'll blow up in his face. Lauren hesitated. Maybe, but knowing Nathan, he won't frame it like that. He's good at spinning stories. He'll make it sound like you're jealous or trying to ruin him out of spite. And even if Vanessa likes your pitch better, she's not going to want to deal with drama. She wasn't wrong. Nathan was great at twisting the truth just enough to make himself look innocent, and if he played the family feud angle, it could turn Vanessa off entirely. Investors hated risk, and personal drama was a risk they didn't want to touch. All right, I said. What do you suggest? Lauren was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her shifting around like she was pacing. I think you need to beat him at his own game, she said finally. Expose him for what he is. Show Vanessa, and everyone else, that he's a liar and a thief. I frowned. How? It's not like I have any proof. It's my word against his. Not necessarily, she said. Nathan's not exactly careful when he talks. I wouldn't be surprised if he said something incriminating in front of his friends or coworkers. If we can get someone to confirm that he stole the idea from you, or even better, get him to admit it himself, we might have a chance. The idea made me uneasy. It felt risky, even sleazy, to dig into someone's private conversations like that. But at the same time, I knew she was right. Nathan wasn't going to play fair, so why should I? Do you think you can get him to slip up? I asked. Lauren paused again, then sighed. I can try. He's been on edge ever since he found out about your meeting. If I push him hard enough, he might say something he regrets. I don't want you to put yourself in a bad situation, I said. If he gets mad, I can handle Nathan, she interrupted firmly. Just focus on preparing for whatever he tries to pull next. I'll take care of the rest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction I'd ever had with Nathan, every little moment that had led to this mess. Part of me still couldn't believe he'd stooped so low, but another part of me wasn't surprised at all. This was who Nathan had always been. The guy who cut corners, took shortcuts, and did whatever it took to get ahead, no matter who got hurt in the process. The next morning, Lauren called again, her voice tight with frustration. Well, I got him to talk, she said, but it wasn't easy. He's paranoid now, so he's being careful about what he says. But he let one thing slip that might help us. What is it? He admitted that he used some of your notes to create his prototype, she said. He didn't say it outright, but he basically implied it. He said something like, Derek wasn't using half the ideas he came up with, so I did. That's something, at least, I said. But it's not exactly a smoking gun. No, but it's a start, Lauren said. And if he said that to me, there's a good chance he's said it to other people, too. We just have to figure out who. I thought about it for a moment. Nathan was the kind of guy who loved bragging about his successes, especially when he thought he'd outsmarted someone. If he talked about stealing my idea to Lauren, there was no way he'd kept his mouth shut around his friends or coworkers. Do you know if he's mentioned anything to his team at work? I asked. Probably, Lauren said. He's been spending a lot of late nights at the office lately, and he talks to his assistant a lot. If anyone knows the full story, it's her. It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. I asked Lauren to subtly reach out to Nathan's assistant, and she agreed, though I could tell she was nervous about pushing her luck. Meanwhile, I had Jared dig into some of the technical aspects of Nathan's prototype. If we couldn't get a confession, I figured we could at least find some flaws in his version that would make Vanessa think twice. By the afternoon, Lauren called back with a breakthrough. You're not going to believe this, she said, her voice trembling with excitement. Nathan's assistant knows everything. She told me he's been bragging to her about how he beat you to the punch. She didn't think much of it at first, but when I told her what really happened, she was horrified. She said she's willing to back you up if it comes down to it. Seriously? I asked, my heart racing. She's willing to go on the record? She said she'd write a statement or talk to Vanessa directly if you need her to, Lauren said. She hates how Nathan's been treating her lately, so I think this is her way of getting back at him. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. With Nathan's assistant on my side, I finally had the leverage I needed. But just as I was starting to feel hopeful, my phone buzzed with a message from Jared. Dude, check this out. He'd attached a screenshot of a message Nathan had posted in some private business forum, bragging about how he'd turned a family member's failed concept into a winning idea. It didn't mention me by name, but anyone who knew us would be able to figure it out. That bastard, I muttered. What happened? Lauren asked. I sent her the screenshot. Your husband doesn't know when to quit. Lauren groaned. I swear, he's his own worst enemy. But hey, maybe this works in your favor. If Vanessa sees that, she'll know he's full of it. That's the plan, I said. By the time Vanessa called me back later that week, I was ready. Nathan had no idea what was coming, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control. When she asked about the tension between us, I calmly explained the situation, providing both the screenshot and the statement from Nathan's assistant as evidence. Vanessa listened carefully, then let out a long sigh. Well, this certainly complicates things, she said. I don't like getting involved in family disputes, but it's clear you've put a lot of work into this. I can't say the same for Nathan's version. I waited, holding my breath. Let me think this over, she said finally. I'll be in touch soon. It wasn't a definitive answer, but it was enough for now. I hung up, feeling cautiously optimistic. Nathan might have tried to ruin me, but I wasn't going down without a fight. Vanessa called the next day, and I could tell by her tone that she'd made up her mind. Derek, I've decided to move forward with you, she said. Your version of the app is polished, the concept is solid, and it's clear you've done the work. Nathan's prototype had too many issues, and quite frankly, I don't appreciate being misled. I nearly dropped the phone. Relief flooded through me, and I managed to stammer out a thank you. Vanessa chuckled, sensing my emotions. I'll have my team draft up the paperwork, she said. Let's make this official. When I hung up, I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I had done it. I'd beaten Nathan at his own game. But of course, Nathan wasn't going to take the loss quietly. That evening, I got a string of texts from him, each one angrier than the last. What the hell, Derek? You sabotaged me. I can't believe you'd do this to your own brother. I didn't respond. There was no point. He'd already shown his true colors, and I wasn't about to waste my energy trying to reason with him. But it didn't stop there. The next morning, I got a call from my mom. Nathan's been calling me non-stop, she said, her voice laced with worry. He's saying you stole his idea. Is that true? Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You know me. I've been working on this app for years. Nathan found out about it and tried to take it for himself. He's just mad that it didn't work. She was quiet for a moment. He's really upset, she said finally. I'm sure he is, I said, but that doesn't change what he did. He stole from me, Mom. I don't know how else to explain it. There was a long pause, and then she sighed. I believe you, Derek. I just hate seeing you two at each other's throats like this. So do I said. But Nathan made his choice. This isn't on me. I could tell she was still torn, but she didn't push the issue. After we hung up, I felt a pang of guilt. I hated dragging her into this, but I couldn't let Nathan manipulate her into thinking he was the victim. A few days later, things escalated. Nathan showed up at my apartment unannounced, pounding on the door until I let him in. He looked disheveled, his hair a mess and his face flushed with anger. You think you've won, don't you? He spat as he stormed inside. I don't think anything, I said, crossing my arms. I just did what I had to do. You went behind my back, he said, pointing a finger at me. You turned my own wife against me. Lauren made her own choices, I shot back. Maybe you should take a hard look at yourself and figure out why she's so fed up with you. His face twisted with rage. You're a joke, Derek. You think you're better than me because you work hard? Newsflash. Hard work doesn't mean anything if you don't know how to sell it. That's why you were never going to make it without me. I felt a flicker of the old anger rise up, but I forced myself to stay calm. And yet, here we are, I said. Vanessa chose me, Nathan. Not you. Because she saw through your bullshit. Nathan glared at me, his chest heaving, and for a moment, I thought he might actually take a swing at me. But then he just laughed bitterly and shook his head. "You're going to regret this," he said. "You think you've got it all figured out, but you don't. This isn't over." With that, he turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. Part of me wanted to believe he was just blowing off steam, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. Nathan wasn't done. A week later, I found out what he meant. I got a call from my lawyer, who told me Nathan was claiming ownership of the app. Apparently, he'd submitted a patent application for the concept weeks before our pitches to Vanessa, using some vague, boilerplate descriptions that closely mirrored my original idea. "He's saying you stole the concept from him," my lawyer said. "He's demanding you stop development and hand over all rights to the app." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. Even though I knew the truth, I also knew that patent disputes could get messy and expensive. Nathan had found a way to drag this out, to make my life hell even after he'd already lost. But what he didn't realize was that I was ready for him. With Lauren's help, I'd compiled a mountain of evidence proving that the app was mine. Time-stamped notes, early prototypes, email chains with Jared, the works. Nathan's flimsy patent filing didn't stand a chance against the sheer weight of proof I had on my side. When the lawyers finally sat down to sort it all out, it didn't take long for the truth to come out. Nathan's case fell apart, and by the end of it, he looked like a fool. But the damage was done. His reputation was in shambles, his marriage was hanging by a thread, and he'd burned every bridge he had. As much as I hated him for what he'd done, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. He'd destroyed himself in his quest to destroy me. In the end, Vanessa's investment helped launch the app, and within months, it was gaining traction in the market. Jared and I celebrated every milestone, knowing how much we'd fought to make it happen. As for Nathan, I haven't seen or spoken to him since the fallout. Lauren left him shortly after the legal battle, and last I heard, he'd moved out of state to start over. It's bittersweet, knowing things will probably never be the same between us. But I've come to terms with it, and sometimes the only way to win is to let them lose.